In many ways, it's sort of a typical Victorian so-called gin palace, although it's a bit of a misnomer. The present pub really dates back from about 1870 and then had a refurbishment in the 1890s, which in many ways was the golden age really of the London pub. It's quite small, and yet the space that we're looking at today would have been further divided up. If you look at the front of the pub, there's 3 doorways. They would have all led into separate spaces. In many ways, a typical late Victorian pub, intimate, lots of little spaces, which was something the Victorians loved. If you wanted to sort of take your mistress into the pub, you know, and not be seen by somebody, then you could go into one of these little snugs which they liked so much. Very, very good quality fittings, which was another great distinguishing feature of the late Victorian era. A lot of conditions came together really to encourage owners of pubs to spend money on their pubs and to get new customers into the pubs. There were a lot of skilled craftsmen working specifically on commissions for pubs, which at that time of course were a lot more numerous than they are even today. And certainly you know, as you walk down that corridor on the right hand side into the back bar and all the way along there, you've got that wonderful glasswork. A technical French embossing which came over from the continent, so that the skill of getting that glass to reflect and shine, the depth of the glass there, cutting the glass so it would pick up the light. They brought these skills across, you know, in the same way that we maybe brought other skills from the Huguenots and so on, you know, textile skills. So we were importing skills from abroad. The woodwork, again, fantastic quality. And certain firms developed skills in specific, you know, were working on fitting pubs out. If you go back to the early Victorian period, the typical pub would have been a big single space. So in a sense, we've come back to where we were. But it was very working class. They'd be very rough. It wasn't a place for either for women or for, you know, members of the middle classes. They wanted to move the pub from being I suppose if you like, the home of the working class. They wanted to rebadge and reposition the pub as a place for wealthy people to come to drink. And a place like the Red Lion no doubt have attracted people in because of its intimacy, because of its attractiveness. It would have probably had they would take advantage of the new electric lights to make the place welcoming. I mean, the legendary London fogs and smogs, of course, at that time would have meant that people would be coming out of the dark into, you know, an attractive, welcoming, warming atmosphere with the mirrors making the place look bigger, but somehow, you know, giving the light and reflecting light. It would have been an attractive environment for people. They would have felt at home there and they would have felt like spending their money, no doubt, yeah. That period of these great lavish fittings was quite short. It was only that last 5 years. We're quite lucky in London because we've got quite a lot of survivors. The Red Lion is a very good example of this late Victorian period of opulence and extravagance, and they've lasted up pretty well. They've stood the test of time. They're still very popular with Londoners, those kind of pubs. The great enduring treasures, if you like, of the English pub is it has, you know, the best ones. It have this wealth of fittings. There's a patina of age, which kind of, you know, you feel that you're in a building that's worth keeping. It's got things worth looking at. Where people have spent money, you know, people have been there before you for a long time, and I think, you know, I think in that sense it's interwoven so much in the fabric of our lives, you know, the pub, and without fossilising them, because places do move on. I think you know, these are things we need to treasure, and I think that is now swimming with the tide. I think people are now beginning to appreciate the importance of these social spaces that are on a human scale, and that's really what the Victorians, you know, at the end of the day, that's really what the Victorians were looking for. They're looking for places that had that intimacy and that human scale, and the ability to hide away, if you like, to sort of open the pub door and step into the cruel world and into another, almost like a sort of fantasy world where they could, you know, they could be transported away with their glass of beer. So So cheers.